I'm not going to try and sugarcoat last night. It wasn't the best performance. It was shaky. I would have loved to hear the president talk more forcefully about his record. He's the one defending a woman's right to choose. He's the one standing up for abortion access. I have seen him talk about these things very forcefully. He also got an infrastructure bill done. But what crystallized last night is that voters have had concerns about his age and about his fitness, and that now has called that back into question. I personally, as a lawmaker who I've done big policy alongside this president, I'm continuing to put my faith in him. He is in that big role to make decisions, and he has made a whole host of decisions very well, very effectively, and I'm going to continue to entrust him to do that and to speak clearly and honestly with the American people, as he has done many times before.
So this is something you see making its way through the convention, and Joe Biden is going to be the nominee, obviously, in your eyes, because a lot of people last night were talking about your governor, Governor Whitmer. Did you talk to the governor after the debate to get her impressions on how things went?
I talked to her a lot. I have not talked to her since the debate. I think she's fantastic. Mm-hmm. She has done a great job.
This whole idea of drafting her in a contested convention, though, is that crazy talk?
Well, look, George Packer talks about creative thinking to save democracy, and many Americans know that's what's on the line here. I mean, we have a former twice impeached convicted felon president who, again, couldn't denounce January 6th, wouldn't say that he would embrace the results of a free and fair election, doubled down on abortion bans, saying that the overturning of Roe was a great thing. And I know that Gretchen Whitmer is a fantastic surrogate for Joe Biden, and she has been standing alongside this administration and alongside him coming out of last night. I'm excited for her future. Again, that's her decision to make down the road in terms of what's going to happen and what's going to unfold over these next series of months. There's an amazing ground operation in Michigan around this Biden campaign. Dozens of field offices, sleeves rolled up, campaign staff, working hard, recruiting people for weekend events. Yes, last night was a tough night. I've worked on tough elections before, tough presidential elections. So we're just going to have to roll up our sleeves and continue to see this through.
But as you describe this as tough, and we have known even prior to tonight that this was likely to be a very close election decided by a very small group of voters, including in your state of Michigan, one of the critical swing states here. Would it be less tough? Would it be easier if the candidate wasn't Joe Biden? I guess my question is Joe Biden the only person in your eyes capable of beating Donald Trump, or could someone else do it just as easily?
Well, look, and I understand why you're asking me these questions, because that's your job, and certainly the hypotheticals, right? You know, it would have been nice if Donald Trump decided not to run again. It would have been nice if maybe another candidate could have beaten him in that major primary that he had. This man is back. He's told us he wants to be a dictator on day one. We've got a guy who has won before against Donald Trump overwhelmingly, has an incredible track record, has a strong vice president, who, by the way, right now is really shining. Listen to her on the national stage right now. Look at the track record. Look at the trustworthiness. And so, yeah, we could sit here and say, gosh, it would be great to have some, perfect hypothetical candidate coming out of the sun that's going to save us all. But that's not the system. And maybe we are in a moment of doing some deep thinking around reforms for our democracy. There's a lot of things that haven't been adjusted or changed. A lot of frustrations. We've got ballooning debt and deficit under a multitude of presidents. We've got a problem at our border. We've got, tight majorities that just pendulum swing between 5 seats here, 5 seats there. And yes, we have sometimes a frustratingly undemocratic process that gets us presidents of the United States. When you don't win the popular vote, but you win by 10,000 votes between, a handful of states, that feels frustrating to the American public.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate this conversation. I know you're not a spokesman for Joe Biden, but it's important to have this talk right now because people are trying to figure things out today.
Yeah.
And one of the big issues that you know a lot about, because it might mean more to Michigan than some other states, is the issue of tariffs. Joe Biden has his approach on this specifically when it comes to EVs. Speaking of Michigan, Donald Trump has a very different approach, and he got into this. It was one of the few moments of policy I might be able to point to from last night. Let's listen to Donald Trump from the debate.
It's just going to cost countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things.
Or will it do something else, like increase inflation at a time when we might be on the cusp of beating it?
Well, look, we know that President Trump's China policy was tariffs, and that did contribute to inflation. President Biden's approach has been aggressive public-private partnerships, industrial policy to the likes that this nation has never seen. You can look to the CHIPS and Science Act, the $52 billion that's been put into the marketplace by the federal government to say that we're going to start making chips here in the United States of America. That was met within the first quarter of its signing, Joe, with $200 billion of private sector contributions. These are things that are paying for themselves. We're also seeing this with the energy transition, where our automotive industry is going, where ethanol is going, tax credits that are also working for us. I think President Biden did the right thing saying, hey, I'm putting tariffs down because I'm not letting cheap EVs flood our market. That's what's really frustrating with the Chinese Communist Party and how they do business.
Finally, as you speak to legislative accomplishments like the CHIPS Act, obviously we are deep in this election cycle. What can we expect from you and your colleagues between now and the election? Is anything robust actually going to be able to get across the finish line?
Well, you know, it's summertime and that senioritis is kicking in a little bit. You know, that itchiness to be home, be in your district, shaking hands. Okay, you know, the elections are in some ways closer than we think, but we do have a whole host of work to get done. And one of the bright lights is this AI task force that I'm sitting on. And we're meeting very regularly. We've gotten direction from both Republican leadership and Democratic leadership that we need to come forward with some ideas, that there's a real want to pass some legislation around AI, if it's looking at regulations or even more so protecting people's privacy, but also ensuring that we can bolster innovation and harness the good, dictate the rules of the road around artificial intelligence for our public health sector, for sciences, and for small businesses across America. So I'm remaining pretty dedicated to that activity.